Welcome to Strain on the Game, the podcast that reveals what it really takes to keep elite footballers performing at the highest level. I'm Stephen Warnock, former Premier League player, joined by physical performance expert Adrian Lamb. From training ground truths to the financial impact of fitness, we discuss the often overlooked challenges behind the beautiful game. Right, welcome back to episode 2 of a two-part special with Dave Fevre. We have actually, we've just had a brilliant chat about your time at Manchester United, about Blackburn. We probably had more time to talk about a lot more, but we thought we'd just jump onto your skill set, Dave, which is actually being
no worries, mate.
And let's just start with the simple part of it. Being on the pitch, a player goes down during a match. What happens? What's your thought process? And potentially if that player comes off, what happens next?
I think one of the important things, and this is the way the world's changed now, and again, I've got my other hat on now, working for the FA on the teaching faculty for the pitch side.
Is there anyone you don't work for?
Well, I try my best. I'm trying to go through all the clubs. I think I've worked out that I've done a physio at 90 out of the 92 clubs. I've got two grounds to do. Yeah, I've got Bristol Rovers and Bromley to do.
Jeez.
So
guest appearance.
I said to Carl Robinson at Salford, because I was at Salford last year, I went, Carl, when you need a physio for Bristol Rovers away and Bromley, I'll do it for free. Just to do all 92. So from that point of view, I understand what you're saying in terms of the easy part of the job. That technically could be the hardest part of the job. Because obviously you can see, like with the Christian Eriksen thing and things like that, where something severe happens. Our job now, and again, probably when I was starting, we'd go to a one-day course, we'd do a first aid, we'd turn up, we'd attend, we wouldn't do an exam, we wouldn't do a practical, we'd pass it, and we'd be technically insured to cover every game and what have you. And in the last 15 years, and I'll give her a shout, Lisa Hodson, who's come in as the head of FA medical now, she's come in and set up the ATMIF and the ITMIF and the other 3 levels of courses. So the support now from the FA is phenomenal, and to the point that probably every organisation in the world wants to take ATMIF on in that way. So there's a lot of work being done there that is now pioneering in terms of the English FA. And I think in that situation, you are obviously wanting to make sure that you deal with the injury exactly right, and assess it and treat it, and I think obviously, like with most things in the world, it takes an incident to happen before that happens, before people start to realise that we need to be a bit better at that. So the mismanagement of injuries is something, especially with social media now.
Yeah.
You've got all the cameras at the games, people on phones, even at academy games, the pressure people are under. And I'd said to Lammy before, the important thing is that when you deal with that, if you're at a Man United or a Chelsea, it's easy because you've got big numbers of staff and but when you're at a Barrow or a Salford City, and even in the women's game at Man City with the WSL, when I was there, the same thing, we were down to like me and the sports therapist and hopefully a doctor for the home games, and then the opposition's team doctor for the away games. That's how it worked.
Yeah.
So in that situation, it's a matter of training your staff accordingly. So to give you an example, say at Barrow, I had a sports therapist who hadn't got any of the FA courses. And I said to him, look, if something happens serious in the game and you see me go into what's called Mills position, where you put the hands on the side of the head, I want you to come on with the oxygen and prime the oxygen bag. And I taught him how to do it. And we had a lad who fractured his zygomatic arch, his cheekbone, at Colchester away. And I'm on the pitch, I'm holding it. This lad comes on. I said to him, Reece, get the oxygen ready. 40 seconds later, it's on. And as we're bringing him off, their doc went, wow, how slick are you guys? So we do practice. I'm not being funny, but I'm an FHU. It would look bad if we didn't have it off to a T. And, I praised the lad and went, that's what I asked you to do, and you did it perfectly. I mean, my aim having been in rugby league, you can run when you want. But in football, you're technically meant to wait for the ref. Now, I obviously have done this job 30 years. I'm yet to get booked, and I'd love to get booked before I retire, honestly. Because I've had opposition benches have a go at me, but if somebody's down and I think it's serious, I'm not waiting for nobody.
No.
And I think at the end of the day, if I got it wrong, I got it wrong. But touch wood, most of the time it's been all right. So you're really making that decision as to what you think is. And again, because of the video stuff now, so let's say at Blackburn, when Paul Fernie Badge he'd message me and go, Dabber, I've seen it, there's a head injury here. It will give you more clinical information as to what's going on. So your initial treatment is massively important. And that ability to limit the size of the injury or deal with it straight away is really, really important. And once you're there, it's a matter of getting them off and into the medical room and then making a decision clinically then once we work how we manage it, whether we need to x-ray scan, whatever we need to do, get them to hospital, whatever it is. And that's your ability to assess and make that diagnosis. And then it's a matter of also being aware that things can alter very quickly.
Yeah.
We had an incident, I can remember at Blackburn a few years ago, lad Jay Bothroyd, who you see on Sky now. And Jay came on, it was Blackburn-Burnley at Ewood, and Jay came on as a sub. And I think the game was 0-0. He came on and he went to have a shot and he hit the corner flag. He shanked it completely. And he's run over to the touchline, and the kit man at that time was Alan Whitehead. You remember?
Yeah.
Little Alsey?
And
Jay Bothroyd hammered Alan Whitehead for giving him the wrong size of shorts. And I'm thinking, that's not right. And we look at his leg, and his leg's swollen like 2 or 3 inches in that time. You could see it swelling in front of your eyes. So I turned to the gaffer and went, you need to get him off. I just put him, I went, he's injured. He's ruptured his thigh.
Really?
So anyway, we sub him. Jay Bothroyd's not happy. And he's having a go at me in the dock and what have you. No, you're coming off. It's not the shorts. You haven't got the wrong size shorts on your legs. And when you rupture a quad, you get immediate pain and then disappears. It's like your leg's fine. It's like a cruciate. And you go on for a cruciate and the lads will go, yeah, I felt something pop in my knee, but it's all right now. I can run it off. And you know that's not a good sign. So we got him off, and Kells went in the room with him. 2 minutes later, Kells is ringing me on the radio, Dad, get in. He's not feeling well. I run in and he's collapsed, gone unconscious. So we had to get him on an IV drip, and then we had to get him off to Wrightington. And he was in for 3 or 4 days. He had to have his femoral artery repaired. So that changeover, those times of not switching off is really, really important. And being aware that things can change in the medical room. You can't send a player with a kit man. It's not the right thing to do. So you've got to be expecting the unexpected. Never sit back on your laurels that a simple injury, a dead leg that you get can be a serious injury. It can go into a compartment syndrome. So you've got to have that in your head when you're doing that initial assessment.
Daver, I've noticed in the last couple of years, it's not just the physio that's running on from the sideline; it's the doc as well. A lot of the time,
yeah.
Is that to add an extra opinion, or what's the purpose and the thinking behind that?
It's not really to have an extra opinion. It's more about there are things that he might be able to do that I can't do or control it.
Oh, we've just lost him.
So in that situation, you might need to just maintain. I might need to take main mills while the doc does it. It might be that if we've got a fracture, one of us needs to stabilise or give Entonox. My first game for Burnley was at West Ham, and it was when Ashley Westwood fractured dislocation. It was a really bad one. I don't know whether you know Westy, but he's a character. He's a great character. You'd have had him at Villa, would you?
Yeah, I know Westy. Yeah.
What a guy, top man, and still playing.
Charlotte, is it Charlotte?
Yeah. Well, it was my first. I'd only met the doc and the physio that morning because Matt Hocking had picked me up and took me down to cover the game. And 20 minutes in, we've got this bad fracture dislocation, and you've got to deal with that straight away. So we had to reduce the fracture on the pitch and get him off in that situation, and then it was obviously rehabbing it from there. So that initial process in Westy's case was massive because his foot did turn blue. We get his sock off and his foot's blue. So you've got to deal with that fracture straight away. You can't be hanging around and putting it in a splint and getting it off. That would have been a severe problem. So you deal with that. It's just normal. It's just, and people go to me about, remember David Booth's injury at Man United Coventry?
Yeah. Coventry, yeah.
So that initial one there, you've got, the lad's gone down. He's not even my player. And again, you might have seen it on the video, but people like Peter Schmeichel couldn't look at it. It was so bad an injury. And the physio at the time wasn't a qualified physio. And he walked off. He couldn't deal with it. So I got called on to look after it. And you get on and basically that's bleeding. It's got horrendous blood coming out of it. So I had to deal with that. And I'm looking around straight away. Who am I going to use for this to help me? So I've got Dion Dublin, who's playing for Coventry, who'd been at Man U. So I knew Dizzy. And then and Brian McClare, who was switched on. So they were brilliant. And I said, look, I need you two because the rest of the lads can't cope with it. It's such a bad fracture. And we didn't have St. John's. We didn't have any docs. It was just me and, well, it was St. John's. There was no paramedics allowed on the pitch at that time.
Hell.
The doc was still in the director's office. He would have been having a whiskey or two. So it was me dealing with that. And I just used Chocky and Dizzy to help me and get Boosty calmed down. And then in the end, because he got a pulse in his ankle, instead of me putting him in a splint, which at that time you only had a back slab, I stabilised it with my hands and we had to carry him all the way around the pitch till we got in the tunnel when the paramedics were allowed to come down the tunnel. And how we dealt with it. And I went to see Boosty the next day. And again, he wasn't my player. And he was like, thanks ever so much for what you did. Boosty, it's not a problem. And we went to play his testimonial at the end of the season. And we just won the league. So we took the cup down. And we had, do you remember the goalie, Raymond van der Gouw?
Yeah.
So we're playing the testimonial, and Raymond had never played in a testimonial in this country before. So we're talking about, and Boosty was going to come on in the last minute and take a penalty that had all been scripted. Gaz Nev says to me, he went, David, do you think Raymond understands how it works? I went, what do you mean? He said, with the penalty. No, he's got no idea, because Raymond was really professional. And he was going to play instead of Peter. So we said, Ray, you do realise there's going to be a penalty in the last minute and David Booth's going to come on and you have to let him score. And he went, I have to let him score? I'm a goalkeeper. If we are winning, it's a testimonial, Raymond. And all the way through the game, you're thinking, this ain't going to work. And Steve Grizovic came on for them up front and all the usual testimonial things. 89th minute, Gary Neville just picks the ball up with his hand. Ref gives a penalty. Boosty walks on, the crowd clap. And we're on the bench thinking, oh, my God, no. He's going to save this penalty. It'd be horrendous. So we're all sat, and we couldn't even watch. We're all sat on the bench thinking, don't save the penalty. Don't save the penalty. Anyway, Boosty sent in the wrong way. Now, we're convinced Raymond was still trying to save it. There's no way in this earth was he not trying to save it. So you got an injury like that, which was a bad injury. And again, obviously, Boosty never played again after that. But fortunately, he didn't lose it. You know, like you read about Lindsay Vonn's injury in the skiing.
Oh,
if she'd not have had surgery straight away, she would have lost a leg.
Yeah.
So that was the same situation with Boosty, really. So that initial time is really important.
So how long did it take you to build that confidence, Dave, when a player either has a bad injury like that or maybe they've rocked their ankle, knee injury, to assess them quickly and understand and trust your opinion or your own thoughts on it?
Yeah. I think, you know what, having been in rugby league, it happens every week. And in football, it happens once, twice a season. And I can remember running on for Steve Bruce at Wimbledon when I first started at United. And you know what it's like with a head injury? When you get a cut, it bleeds like mad and then you wipe it all away and there's like nothing there.
Yeah,
exactly. And I remember running onto him and for Brucey to go down, it took a lot. And I get onto the pitch and I'm looking at him and he's with it, he's fine. And there's blood pouring from him. I wiped it away and I looked at Brucey and went, Brucey, you've called me on for that. It's about less than a centimetre. And it just needs a bit of, and he went, I'm not one of your tough rugby players, you know. But that's how Brucey was. He's that type of character. After the Boosty one, when we came on the Monday, the press were all in the reception at the Cliff. And usually I'd just walk past them anyway. Tabba, can you have 2 minutes? Yeah. David, how did you manage that? I said, look, can I not be funny? I'm not trying to sound arrogant here, but I dealt with that every week in rugby league. It's not a problem. And again, I'm not trying to sound arrogant, but I feel strong in my own ability to assess that and make that decision. And we just did what we had to do. And the nice thing was that it worked out fine. Even though he's not my player, it worked out fine. And it's just an inner confidence, really. And again, being a tutor now on the other side, I can sort of relate to all the younger physios that are coming through and go, look, just got to keep your head. You'll make some mistakes. Those happen. You know, I've made mistakes. There's things where things don't work out properly. But if you get the big shots right, then you'll be fine. But it's just I've just always been like that.
So Dave, then moving on from that period of initial assessment into the sort of next 24, 48 hours of the injury, you've got the player back into the training ground. What happens next?
Now, that depends on where your medical team goes. For me, you clinically have to assess it. Unfortunately, in the present day and age, and particularly now with some of the Premier clubs where they've got their own MRIs, the first thing is that the player and his agent will want an MR. And my view is that that's a dangerous thing to do in the early stages, because if you MR it within the first 48 hours, you might miss something. And everybody wants a scan. They all want this. Clinical assessment, unfortunately, people are getting lazy. It's a bit like the VAR with the refs. Physios are the same with MR. Easiest thing is send them for a scan. And I don't agree with that. I think get your hands on it, have a look at it, see what you can determine. Have a set number of tests. So let's say we're doing a hamstring test. I've got eight hamstring tests that I rely on. And what'll happen is, let's say, Lammy, it's you, and you've come in the treatment room. I've assessed you, and you've got pain on 6 out of the 8 tests. You go home that night, and I've seen it with many a player, and there's a player that we both work with this happened all the time. He might go home, have an argument with his missus, fall out with the kids. You come in the next day and you go, how was it fit? Oh, it's horrendous, worse than yesterday. And I've written on the board, luckily, 6 out of 8. And I'll do all the tests, and it's 3 out of 8. And I'm going, well, actually, it's better than it was yesterday. Because I always got brought up with this philosophy that every injury has a biochemical, a biomechanical, and a psychosocial influence. So, yeah, it's the way you run, it's the way you heal, but it's also things that happen away from the training ground that can have an effect. So if you can prove to the player that actually it's only 3 out of 8 instead of 6 out of 8, they go, actually, you're right, Dad, it must be a bit better. But yeah, I had a bad night's sleep, fell out with the missus, kids were a nightmare. That's probably why it feels worse, and that can happen. So
yeah, the element of not like being something away from the injury and away from football, and being more so behind the scenes. And again, how did you pick up on that?
I think again, you get used to that, where players would say, I can give you another story, but again, a mutual friend of ours, and he won't mind me telling this story. Stephen Reed, and Reedy came. Reedy obviously is what a guy, what an athlete in terms of his resilience and everything else. And we had a great relationship, and we still have a great relationship now. And Reedy had unfortunately he'd avulsed his attachment of his hamstring into the back end of his knee, which is an unusual injury. And he came in one day and he said, Davra, don't know what we did yesterday, but it's worse today. So like you do, you self-reflect. I always self-reflect. And that, again, is one of the things that we'll probably talk about in the next 20 minutes or so. But self-reflection's massive, and there's not enough people self-reflecting. You know what? Maybe I pushed them too much. Because you have to remember that injured tissue only needs a 2% change in load to actually become more irritable. So you can only change your loads. If, let's say, you guys are both fit and you go and train, we can push you beyond that level. But if you've got an injury, we have to take that a lot slower. So you have to, in your interest to try and push it, you've got to make sure you don't overdo it to irritate it. So he came the next day, and I'm going through everything we did the day before, and I'm thinking, no, there's nothing there, Reedy. What did you do last night? He said, I went out, I had a couple of beers, and the doc had scanned it, and there was more fluid there. He said, a couple of beers. All right, okay, so we look at it. I still can't get it in my head. And like with anything in your life, there's a piece of the jigsaw didn't fit. And I'm thinking, that's not right. There's something not, and I can't put my mind on it clinically. So I said, Reedy, just out of interest, how would you define a couple? He went, 8. All right, okay. So do you think I've had an influence, Dabra? I went, yeah, because if we've got an area that's got a leakage in it, you then put a vasodilator in that makes it bleed more. That'll make it. And me and Reedy still laugh about it now, because we use about, he might text me, I've had a couple. I went out for dinner with him a while ago, and he went, are we having a couple tonight? No, Dav, we're not having 8 beers tonight. Wow. But you look at that and you think that, the difference that can make is massive.
You talked about that one before, about alcohol and the influence it can have.
Yes.
But you're saying there, I didn't understand the terminology of it, but just give people who are listening and watching, because obviously people are picking up injuries all the time, whether they're non-league, semi-professional, whatever it might be, and then they'll go out and have a beer and think, that'll be all right. It won't affect the injury, but it does.
It's a vasodilator, but then you can get, so there's Mickey Gray. So Mickey Gray, we played on the Saturday, and Mickey Gray's come in. Normally, if you got injured on a Saturday, you had to be on a Sunday, whether we weren't or not. Yeah. There was no turning up on a Monday and telling me there's an injury. Anyhow, Mickey Gray turns up on Monday, He said, Davy, my ham's tight. Mickey, where the hell were you yesterday? Oh, I couldn't come in yesterday. And we all know what Mickey's like. So I said, all right, okay. So the doc scans it and he went, yeah, grade 2 hamstring tear. So I pulled Mickey. I went, Mickey, I'm not being funny. I said, I've got to explain this to the gaffer because I've rung him yesterday and he says, Davy, I'll tell you now, I'll be fit for Saturday. I said, it's a grade 2, the doc's. He said, can I have a word in the office? I went, yeah, go on. So he's pulled me. He went, Davy, I'm not being funny, but Saturday night, I was drinking Guinness all night. He said, and I don't know how much I've had. He said, but next day I couldn't have come in yesterday. I was so bad. He said, honestly, I'm sure that's what's made it worse. It was only like a little niggle. So I pulled the doc and the doc went, nah, never going to be right, never going to be right. So I go into the gaffer and I said, look, don't shoot the messenger, but I'm here to tell you that Mickey's got a grade 2 scan on it with a hamstring injury, but there are other factors that might have had an influence on it. And the gaffer was like, yeah, what do you mean? I said, well, he might have had a beer or two or whatever. I said, so let's just sit on it for a day or two and see how it is. 48 hours later, he went, Davor, I can train on this. So I take him out on the Wednesday. The lads aren't in. We're training. Thursday you train, Friday you train, Saturday you played.
Wow.
And I said to the doc, I went, Doc, that's knowing your player and knowing what he's told me. And he was honest enough to tell me that it was alcohol influenced. And Mickey was, Mickey's that type of character, and he'd run through a brick wall. And yeah. And that honesty made a difference. Without that, we'd have had him out for 4 to 6 weeks. So alcohol was our difference, yeah.
As you've said before to me many times, treat the man, not the scan. But I just want to quickly ask you, Dave, just to explain in that early acute phase of the injury, why you don't want players to have an MRI.
Yeah, I think the danger is that you might pick up things that are not relevant to the injury. Again, I can think of players when we've done medicals where they want to do a scan on it, and you have to realize that 2/3 of, let's say you scanned a player's hip. So you take a squad of 24 players and we scanned everybody's hip. 2/3 of those players will have a labral tear or an injury in the hip. It's a chronic injury that's not giving them any clinical symptoms. So for every player that we scan, and I can think of a player that we re-signed at Blackburn and we scanned him and he went, I've never had a pain in my hip, but my scan's telling me there's a problem. He played nearly every game for us, so we re-signed him even though he had a labral tear. So you have to understand that a lot of scans will give you false positives. And so you have to understand also that some of them might be chronic injuries or things that were there 2, 3, 4 years ago that are not relevant to the present situation. So it's understanding what's relevant to that particular injury, because every player will have some chronic changes here and there, but is it relevant? If you scan a player's groin, every professional footballer will have a positive symptom in the reductors. Absolutely guaranteed, because that's the nature of the occupation. You scan my hands, I've probably got the same thing in my hands because that's what my job's been. It's the same with footballers. So it's understanding that what's relevant to the injury and what's stopping the problem.
What do you think the issue is, Dave? What do you think the issue is for up-and-coming physios then? Is it the tutoring that they're getting given, how they're being taught to do this, or is it a bit of an easy way out just to do the MRI?
Easy way out. And it's back to the VAR thing, with the ref. You guys I listen to you guys talking on it on the telly, and it's an easy option because they've got a backup. You watch that from that's the same with the MR here, but it's lazy. It's a lazy physio because you're not doing a clinical assessment. You're not knowing your players. You're not treating the individual. It's like going on the internet and getting a sheet of exercises for an ACL injury and giving it to player A, player B, and player C. Well, that player A, that player B, and that are very different athletes. So, like now, when I assess, which I've always done, I don't really want to know their injuries. I want to know what I'm dealing with the athlete's profile. You guys probably remember the Yanda test we used to do, where we used to go into forward sit and reach, things like that. And every player was different. 50% of the squad weren't category A because they'd got a lot of tightness in various areas. And we had to deal with that accordingly. I can remember doing it and looking at people like, say, Phil Jones and Grant Hanley. Now, Grant's somehow still playing because he was so immobile. And you'd like to think that some of it is the fact that you did all that mobility work with him when he was 17 and 18. That's because he was one of the worst we had. And I used to keep drilling it into him all the time about his mobility, because without your mobility, you're just never going to be able to deal with it, especially somebody like him. the size of him. But as rapid as he was, he's still playing to this day and probably going to play in the World Cup. So,
I
it's good to see.
that
So that screening's important. Sorry, Lammy.
I remember that Yanders test through Austria in the first week.
Yes.
We did it every day, didn't we? And you and I used to discuss that, and you would brilliant part of my education talking through the effects that the load that we put them through in the previous day were having on the mobility. And I think Grant was one who actually got better as the week got on, whereas other players got stiffer. He was one that started getting better, which was interesting.
You just like Pascal. Yeah, Pascal Chimbonda and El Hadj. They were horrendous, but during the week as they trained more, and they were lads that would just train, they got better without anything being done for them. But they were older players, and yet somebody like Michel Salgado, Mitch comes from Real Madrid, he was as stiff as a board. Nuno Gomez, another one. Nuno, he just could not move, but he'd played 760 games. So it's getting that ability to realise what the skeleton can deal with. And I've taken that everywhere I've gone. So everywhere I've gone, whether it be Burnley, Barrow, Chelsea, and you go in and you show people this, whether it be medical staff or players, and they go, "Oh, that's really clever." No, it's not clever. It's pretty simple, to be fair. There's 8 categories, and those 8 categories, we can subdivide the players, and then we do this work with all the players who are category E, and this work with the players who are category B, and so on. And it's just a matter of screening your squad. And again, you remember like the screening stuff where if we've got baseline information before they get injured, it's brilliant. Because, and a lot of clubs are still not doing it now, but if you've got injury before the injury occurs, you know what they've got to get back to.
Yeah.
So if you haven't got that data, I remember when Leon Best did his cruciate. Bessie had signed, he'd played 4 games for us. And because we got all his data before his injury, it made his rehab so much more smoother. And Bestie was one of them again where you could dangle a carrot and go, look, before your injury, this is where you were. And he would bang into it. He'd just get on with it, and that was it. So it's really important to have that baseline information before the injury and then treat the injury. And then once you get into your injury rehab plan, you then effectively subdivide that into a maximum protection, a moderate protection, and minimum protection. So you divide up your 3 stages. And then within those 3 stages, you've got 5 pillars of rehab. So you've got mobility, stability, control mobility, load and skill. So when you're doing the maximum protection, so in your acute phase, obviously your emphasis is going to be on mobility and stability. And wherever you can, you try and bring some functional in. So like, obviously we would do things like, not in the early stages, but we'd try and get a ball involved as quickly as we could.
Yeah.
When we had people like Joe Garner, Tony Kane, I've still got videos and pictures of them when they were doing it, but doing work like Joe 2 weeks into his ACL, doing stability with a ball and doing half volleys and things like that. So as soon as you can bring the skill in, and then as you move through the moderate protection where you can let them go a bit more, you start to do a bit more loading, you can take them out of the pool, you can do more jogging and so on. I mean, obviously we spend hours talking about that, but and then when you get into the minimum protection, that's where you're getting into your outdoor phase, where you're going down the sandpit, you're going on your Alter G, you're going outside, and you're trying to do things with them as quickly as you can. And again, think about, things like not just the rebound boards. Remember the wave boards that we used to have that were made by Adidas?
Yeah.
And Morton brought them over. And as soon as you could get the lads out, because what happens is you're playing the ball against the board and you're on your toes. So if you watch Gianfranco Zola when he's in his prime, on his toes all the time, moving the ball. And again, I was lucky enough to work with him in a seniors tournament. Oh my God, his ability. What a guy. And his ability, he could get, but players who've been injured, and again, you'll probably understand this one, having been at, once the players have been injured, they've had a long-term injury, they actually don't want to get on the toes. They want to sit back on the heels because they're stable. They've got a nice, stable base. And it's hard then to get them to be shifting the ball. So again, we used to, with the treadmill at all the clubs I've been at, put some 10-pin bowling sides on it and then get a ball on the treadmill and get the lads jogging with the ball on the treadmill early days so that you're making it functional. Lads don't, if you can keep them entertained, they want to do it. If you're just going to sit there and do it all for them, and they're not, it's really important that you get that side of it, that buy-in. Otherwise, it becomes a long procedure.
How important is that, Dave, actually, on the balance? Because you're taking players through rehab at different lengths of time to get that balance between that functional side and things, treatment and training that's going to get them back, but also keeping them stimulated mentally.
Yeah.
And adding variety into that. How difficult is that? And what kind of things do you do to try and create that?
Yeah, for me, it's not difficult. It's simple. Let me give you. So let's say when Roy was injured, so when Roy did his cruciate, obviously that was going to be challenging. And my view in terms of Roy was this is obviously Roy Keane, when Roy did his cruciate, I knew that Roy would need a day off. I probably don't need to say any more than that. And I knew that I would give Roy every Sunday off. And I pulled Roy and I went, look, before we start, this is how we're going to go with it. I'm going to give you every Sunday off. And on a Monday, you're going to come in and I'll have left all your work at the entrance to the gym with your name on. We're not going to talk. I'm going to deal with the rest of the lads who played in the game. And then we'll start Monday lunchtime. All right. So he would come in, potter around, do what he felt he could do. I'm trying to be politically correct here. So in that situation, he would do that. And then Monday lunchtime, that was it to me, and then all the way through till Saturday. So we go, and one of the hardest things was Thursday afternoons. So Thursday afternoons, I would go over to David Lloyd near his house, and we'd get in the pool. And a lad called Terry Cook, again, you guys might not remember him.
Yeah, no, Terry
was
Cook.
A winger.
Yeah,
a
winger, yeah.
Yeah, so Cookie had done his cruciate as well. So we decided, that's right. So Cookie, you're going to do the same as Roy. We're going to go over to Wilmslow on a Thursday because I knew I could get Roy to buy into it on a Thursday afternoon. We're going to get in the pool. And he used to hate it. So we get in on a Thursday and we get in the pool. And I can remember one day we're at David Lloyd. And as we're there's two lads from Man City there, Uwe Rosler and Alan Kernigan. And they're sat in the jacuzzi. And we get in and I've taken all the floats, the flippers and everything. I've got the schedule. I put it on a whiteboard. It's at the end of the lane. Me, Cookie and Roy are doing it together. And we're halfway through. Roy stops the session. So he pulled Dava. Why are those two idiots sat in, and I'll use a word that he wouldn't have used. Why are those two idiots sat in the jacuzzi doing sweet FA and I'm here working my bollocks off? And I went, let's put it this way, Roy. That's why you play for United and that's why they play for City. So let's get on with it. And he went, that'll do for me. And off he went and just finished the session. Yeah, he was brilliant. Honestly, he was like, I know, but, I get on great with Roy. I still do now. We meet up every couple of times in the year and we chat and what have you. But he's top draw, and his attitude to rehab was phenomenal. He was brilliant. He's one of the best ones I've had. Just got on with it and never questioned it.
Brilliant. How when you've got the players at the sort of the end of the injury, I know you've just talked about the 5 stages there. What's your criteria then that you look at to say, right, this player's ready and ready to be released to the squad?
Yeah. So the hardest thing is it's fine when you're doing one-on-one and it looks all right. And then you need to start bringing some numbers in. So I've had times where I've brought some of the academy lads in. If I've got enough, I've got no airs and graces about, I think that this is where the game's changed a little bit. I've got no airs and graces in terms of having academy players, reserve team players, all training together.
Yeah.
I don't see it now where players want one-on-one. And again, the nice thing at that stage, say at Chelsea, we had the same thing where I would have 6 players and I'd take them out and I'd have a mixture of say Kovacic, Thiago, Silva with a couple of young lads. And it works brilliantly with that because you needed the bigger numbers. I needed the bigger numbers to make it more competitive.
Yeah.
And try and make it that area. Now, the problem is that when you want to get, say, 8v8, you're going to have to start dropping them in and being a floater and again, it depends on your manager and your coach, how good they are at letting you do that. Again, I've never had any trouble from any of the coaches. They've all been top drawer in that sense because they think the player's nearly there. They're really good at helping out. So that's where you've got to start feeding them in and dropping them in that situation. But I think in my decision, it's as long as you tick your mobility off and stability, the healing of the time's right, you're not rushing them back in that sense. But my worry, and again, this is probably something you're going to ask me in a minute, so I'll preempt it. But the present day rehab side of it, there's a massive emphasis on isometric strength with, and again, the Kanga tech or the node boards and so on. And I worry that we are now in a situation where we're becoming number reliant. We're totally reliant on numbers. And I think what happens is that instead of using that skill mix and that knowledge, we're now reliant, well, the numbers say he's not ready to train. The numbers say And I had a situation at Chelsea where somebody came to me and went, we were in the medical meeting in the morning. I'm asking about this player. Yeah, he can't train today because his tensor fascial lata strength is down from what it was 2 days ago. Now that for the listeners is a thick band of tissue on the outside of your leg. And I went, what have we come to? You're telling me that they can't train because that muscle that's not really going to have any effect on training. Yeah, but that tells you he's fatigued. And I went, if you'd have said that about his adductors, I'll have it because he's changed the way he runs. He's running at 10 to 2. But don't give me all that. No, he's training. Don't give me the numbers on that. And the problem is now that a lot of people now are using the numbers to go, you know what? It's a safer bet if he doesn't train. And that's where the clinical practice of it's gone. And then it worries me. It worries me that we're just relying on what the numbers are telling us. It might be hydration levels. It might be that he doesn't want to try too hard. He might not be pushing too hard. It might have nothing to do with anything that way. So,
and I know this is a little bit of a side movement on that, but that reminds me of, or sort of picked something up in my brain there, where I'm thinking Reece James at Chelsea with the situation of Maresca, and they're saying he can only play this amount of minutes, and this is where he's at. You can't have him. And Maresca essentially walked out because he was like, I'm not having people above me telling me, literally because of stats and numbers, that he can't play a game. So it's absolutely crazy the way it's going.
I mean, I worked with Enzo at Leicester for 4 months, and Enzo is very focused and he's very driven. His staff were excellent. And what he found difficult was in the morning, I would always go up and shake his hand. And he found that very unnerving. He found he wasn't used to a physio coming up to him. And I spoke to Marcos, he's a fitness coach, and he went, he's just not used to it, David. He's just not used to it. And then when we won the league that year, so Leeds lost on the Friday, and we came in on the Saturday to train at Leicester. And the gaffer came in, he was a different man, smiling, we'd got promotion. He went, lads, nobody's working. I don't know whether you know, but at Leicester's training ground, there's a 9-hole golf course.
Yeah.
So we go in, and the gaffer went, lads, nobody's working. Chairman wants to just have dinner with you all later on and everything. And he became a different person. I looked round at Reevesy, the fitness coach. You know him, Lammy. You've worked with him.
Yeah.
And we go in. I went and said to Reevesy, what are we going to do? He went, Dava, let's have a 4-ball, 16 people, all put a tenner in. So I text my missus like an hour later, I'm getting paid for playing golf. Wow. But in that situation, that's where Enzo would be like. And I did when I was there, one of my patients was Casey McAteer, who's at Ipswich. And again, Casey was, he was a young lad. He was confidence in terms of his hamstring. And the gaffer was very much into like, it's mentally, I don't know, I used to go, gaffer, he's not mental. He's a really good lad. He's working hard. He's doing everything we're asking of him. You need to just back off and let him. And we kept holding him back. And I think Enzo was on the line. We were protecting him too much, but he needed to be protected. And we didn't need it at that stage. We were actually going all right. And it wasn't like Casey was going to start every time. And then he did start at Preston when we won the league. So I think at that stage, it's trying to be strong and making sure you do that. And Enzo's a strong character, so you need to do it. And Reece is a powerful, I've obviously I didn't work directly with Reece, but I know Reece really well. And, Reece is a great lad. And he's had a tough time with injuries, and I understand why he needs to manage himself. The game's tougher, isn't it? It's changed the way it's played nowadays.
Just within that, there's loads of possible questions that have just come up from what you said there, Dave. But you spoke, and I know within your time you've gone from being a one-man band doing everything to suddenly you've got these massive staff, sports scientists and doctors and coaching staff and rehab specialists and then the technology, GPS and all of these things. How has that changed your approach to rehab, and does it in some way make things easier, at the same time make certain things more difficult?
Yeah, I think, again, with the lads I've worked with on GPS, and again, I'm going to use Chelsea as an example. The lads there were excellent in terms of, I find it's really useful in terms of looking at what I've set up. So I would write down all my work, take my workload, go up to the lads, and then let them be able to show me what, have I pushed them hard enough? Have I pushed them too much? And one of the things I always do, and you guys might remember this, but I always put my own kit away. And over the years, I've always done it. And the lads will go, no, and like even the lads I had in my group, like Cover and Thiago, said, no, don't go anywhere near the stuff. I said, you do that, you touch any of them poles, I'll have you. And I can remember with Thiago. I'll tell you that story in a minute. But in that situation, I would always put my own gear away because it gives me a chance to reflect before I go into the madhouse of the treatment room. Because as soon as you go in, somebody wants your attention. And I've not had time to look at my session and go, you know what? And I remember reading Steve Redgrave's book many years ago. So great Olympic rower. And he was talking about, some lad came up to him and he said, oh, Mr. Redgrave, you finish your training session. I'll clean the oars. No. You never do that, son. He said, I always clean my own boat. I always clean my own oars. And I was exactly the same with the rehab session. It gives me time to reflect on the session. Have I pushed them too much? Have I not done enough with them? How do I change it? What could I have done better? And that 10 minutes for me buys me a bit of thinking time. I come back in and then suddenly somebody will want you because they want to do the IKD. They want to do your assessment. So you haven't got time to think then. And then I'd back it up with the GPS. And the lads were brilliant at sectioning it off for me, putting it into my session and see where, you know what, I could make that a bit harder. I could have done that a bit more. I could have. So I find there's a lot of benefits that way. I think the negatives is like we talked about there about using it to try and pull players out of training. Do we need to be doing that? Because I think Alan Pardew said it years ago about, we're using numbers and I don't know Alan at all, but I thought that was one of the things he said. I can see what you're saying. We've gone away from that ability. Graham Souness would never have GPS. When he'd been in Italy, Sui said, we never used it. It was all about using your eyes and your ears and everything else. I wouldn't disagree with him. There's a lot to be said for that.
Do you think, well, the one of the questions I really wanted to ask you, Davo, was how much, I'm trying to work out how to say this. So a player who picks up a bad injury, is it more down to bad luck or is it more down to injury prevention and what you can do to prevent that?
I think there's a high percentage that we can find things that will possibly put them in a high risk group. So when we're doing our pre-season IKD stuff, if we analyze it in the proper way where we look at concentric eccentric, then we might be able to find a factor where we then have to say, you know what, we need to be a little bit particular with this player. So like the Grant Hanleys of the world where we do more mobility work. Now, whether he's carried it on, I don't know. I've not spoke to Grant for a few years. But you would hope that somewhere the penny's dropped, that if he does this mobility, it's going to keep him playing forever and ever. Amen. I remember Giggsy, when Giggsy was younger, Giggsy obviously went through that period where he had injured. Stephen Gerrard would have been the same. And then as they got older, once they got past 24, the skeleton matured and they got better and better. And somebody like Giggsy, I was speaking to Giggsy because he's been director of football at Salford. He obviously started doing yoga and things like that and played a massive number of games. So in that situation, people like, again, Declan Rice, plays a massive number of games. So you're hoping that somebody like him, I'm sure, has got really good people working him at Arsenal. He obviously seems a really sensible lad, listening to stuff he says. And then on that basis, that's going to be massively important for somebody like him who's going to play 55, 60 games a season.
Davo, we've spoke about this before on the podcast, and we talk about outside influences. So we talk about the one-on-ones that players are having with coaches, but also physios now.
Yes.
How difficult's that for you to deal with?
Yeah, not easy. To reverse it now in my situation, now I get agents ringing me about seeing players, and they'll go, I've got a player wanting to see, and it's fine. I said, just get the doc from the club to ring me and the physio. And, no, we want you to see him outside. I said, you'll find somebody, but you won't get Dave Fevre. I've not been brought up that way. I said, so I don't want to do that. I think the important thing, going back to Chelsea where we had that, was some of the players, most of them, it was they'd have a dietitian, they'd have a masseur, they'd have a strength and conditioning coach. I can't really think of anybody. Oh yeah, Cover had his own physio in Milan. But Cover, do you remember, I don't know whether you guys would have played with a lad called Gresco. Do you remember the, where was he from now? He was Eastern European lad, left back.
Yeah.
And Vladislav Gresco, I think his name was. And again, typical Croatian, 2 hours prep, train, lots of low intensity work, and Cover's like that. And because we knew Nico Kalinic, he was his best mate. So obviously we had Nico, and I said, I work with Nico. So he was chatting away. And I got on really well with Cover. I really liked his attitude. And some of the lads, we'd go in the medical, oh yeah, Cover's doing his 2 hours prep. He's one. I went, whoa. I'm buying it. I'm having some of this work that Cover does. He's very disciplined. He's very professional. His workload is intense. But that's the way he's been brought. And that's the way his skeleton works. And I like that. And he had this guy in Milan, but you had to drip feed things in and go, Cover, run this past your guy. I want to do IKD with you. That's fine, Dave. How many am I going to do? I said, well, you're going to do 5 sets of 60. Yeah, that's me. That's me. I like 300 reps. That's what I want to do. Not like certain other players would have done 10 reps. And Cover and I got on really well, and I really enjoyed his company. And in that sense, it was a matter of just communicating, and he would run it past the Milan physio, and he'd come back, go, yeah, that's fine. And that wasn't a problem. And I think as long as there's that open dialogue, that's all right. My worry is that when you've got situations away from it, and I think it's more from Lammy's point of view than S&C coach, that's probably harder, because what work they're doing away from the training ground, if you don't know, how can you possibly set up a structure for that player without recognising that you might be on a fatigue muscle? I know a couple of lads at Chelsea have had this issue where they want to do more, and I understand the professionalism. And I remember speaking to him about it and went, look, I get it, but you have got to be honest with the S&C coaches. And if you're not careful, you're going to end up coming to see me or Husey or Mike because you're going to be injured. So you just got to be a little bit smarter. And some of the lads were like, Raheem was really good. Raheem, like, he was very good that way. And you could talk to him, really intelligent and everything else, you know, and he has this image of not being like that. And yet he was excellent to work with. And as long as you could say, look, just be honest, just give us where you're at. And I think in that situation, that's really important. But you need the players that are professional. So like somebody like, say, Thiago Silva. Thiago, very professional, ultimate professional, coming every day after training. He'd come in the next day, preventative work. He had a masseur at home. But he had a big issue. He didn't speak a lot of English. And the head of performance said to me when he got injured, he went, Dav, I'm not going to give him to you. I'm going to give him to the guy that can speak French and American, Spanish and everything else. Well, that's fine. We had a physio that had never worked in football before, and he was from Malta. Lovely guy, but he'd got a few personal issues back in Malta, and him and Thiago didn't get on. They did not get on, and he'd walk around the gym and he'd be following him around with a clipboard, and you're thinking that's not going to work, and you could see like Thiago wasn't having it, so he's gone in, and after 2 weeks, I pulled the head of the phone and said, look, why don't we get David home to Malta? His dad's not well, he needs to go. Him and Thiago are just not getting on. And I went in the room in the medical meeting and went, right, lads, we've got a spare player today. I've got 6 in my group, so I had 6 to take outside. Said Thiago Silva. And nobody put their hand up. And I'm sat there with 15 staff and me, so 16. Not one person put their hand up to look after Thiago because they knew it was going to be hard work. And I went, I don't believe this. I said, what a challenge. That's how you got to look at it. It's a challenge. Every injury we have, every player that I don't get on, it's a challenge. Somebody surely is going to take him. Anyway, nobody put their hand up. I did throw my toys out. I went, no problem, you can come with me. So I take him out. So Thiago comes with me. I've got Koulibaly. I've got Cover. I've got Amanda Brozier. I've got Tino Andrew. So I've got a mixture of young and old. And we're doing the warm-up. And as we're going around the pitch, Thiago's on his phone doing his warm-up. Oh my God. And I can see Cover looking at me as if to say, Davin, what are you going to do here? Now, if it had been Chris Taylor or if it had been somebody from Blackburn days, I would have gone for him. And I thought, whoa, just back off a bit. He's got 2 lads in the academy. He's got his family here. He's from a foreign country. You don't speak. So I thought, I'm not going to rip him up. So I got, T, everything all right? And he looked at me and he started laughing. And he got the phone and he threw it at me. And it was my phone. I dropped it in case I needed to get some help. Well, that broke the ice. Honestly, Warnie, and I was like, and for 2 weeks, he was brilliant. His ability and his enthusiasm, and him and I got on really, really well. Anyway, he went back to training and we were playing Real Madrid on the Wednesday. And this is when Frank was manager and Ashley Cole was with him. So I had to go and cover training because the doc was doing something else. And I had to cover training and take the rehab outside. You wouldn't think with 16 that I'm doing the outdoor rehab and covering training because there were enough staff. But we had a situation where there was only 2 of us that did outdoor rehab. And I had a sports therapist and me at 60 odd. And I went in the nobody wants to do the outdoor rehab. I don't get you. So I've gone out cover training, and a guy walks over to me, and he's the head of performance from Brazil, and he introduced himself. Hi, such and such. He said, Thiago thinks the world of you. I said, no. I said, he had a difficult time to start. I said, probably because I'm a bit older. I said, but we do get on very well. I said, but it didn't start off like that. He really struggled. So we're covering training, and 20 minutes in, Thiago goes down, sits on the floor. I went, oh no, he's felt his knee or something. So I go on. I went, T, all right? Dave, training's shit. This is shit. That is shit. I went, I'm not bothered about that, Thiago. How's your knee? Knee's fine. Well, if you have any complaints about training, go and have a word with Ash or go and have a word with the gaffer. He said, no, you take training. Thiago, listen to what I'm telling you. Your knee's fine. We're playing Real Madrid in 3 days. Any moans, go to the gaffer. So I came off the pitch and the head of performance went, is he all right? I went, yeah, he's fine. His knee's fine. And he's just having a titty lip at the minute. Things haven't gone well. And he played in the game. He was fine. But he was brilliant. We had a barbecue and my wife came down, and he was brilliant with my wife. He came down chatting to her and everything. Your husband's, it was really nice. So he's a top quality. Guy. But just that rehab bit was massive in terms, and having him around in that group, his ability on the ball and his professionalism to stretch in everything he did was first class. So it made a massive difference. And the young ones followed as well. So Tino and Amando then copied what he did, and he was a great guy. But
that's brilliant. What a story that is.
No.
I think. Oh, go on, Lammy.
Yeah, you've just spoken there, Dave, about you've got a massive staff. Yep. Nobody really put their hand up and work with difficult playing. We've
not difficult, Lammy. Challenging
play. Not sorry.
It's never a difficult player. It's just a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do you feel, and we've sort of touched on this a little bit in terms of new tools, new technologies coming in, over a reliance on scans. Do you feel as though a lot of the manual therapy skills, the delivery skills, are going out of the young physiotherapists and practitioners that are coming through? Because I know you do a lot of teaching, and you've really got your finger on the pulse there. Well, how do you see this evolution of the game and how that's impacting on what physios are being asked to do now and how they're actually doing the job?
I think one of the issues is, and I'm not saying this happens at a lot of clubs, but sorry, I am saying this happens at a lot of clubs. What's happening now is that clubs now are trying to fulfill the FA criteria for having so many physios. So in a lot of situations, obviously Championship, League One, League Two, they need to have a physio or two physios, and they will go for the cheapest option. So their option is the cheapest option will be the young, inexperienced physio. And then what happens is, and this is from a selfish point of view, this works well for me, is the fact that something goes wrong and players break down. So going into Salford City last year, I went in with 2 players who kept breaking down all the time. And the physio's a lovely lad, really inexperienced, but really keen, but nobody to really supervise him. So I go in to look after these 2 long-term and try and help him in that situation. And it's a false economy. And unfortunately, that's the way the world is now, is that it's about numbers of staff. It's about having staff available and going around to players' houses and doing that. But what we'll do is to tick that box, we'll put really young, inexperienced physios in. Male, female, whatever it may be in that situation. And in that situation, that then creates, short-term, it answers the problem, but long-term, when you get chronic injuries, then it becomes an issue. And that then is then where they go, you know what, we need to change tack here and bring in a bit more experience or something along that way. And that's my worry. And again, I'll give you a story from Leicester. I did a week on the academy just to get to know the people. I said to the docs, I think it's the best way of doing it. I went in, and my first day there, what do you want me to show you? And they went, can you do a knee assessment for us? I went, oh my God, that must be your bread and butter. And I'm getting asked to do a knee assessment and show them how to do a knee assessment. And I thought, wow, that's telling me a lot about what they're learning at college these days or at uni and getting the qualification. So it is a difficult situation.
That's quite scary, isn't it? Dave, we'll just finish on this last question. And it was, if fans could see what actually happens during the rehab process, what do you think would surprise them the most?
How hard the players work. I get male people write to me and they'll look on the internet and they'll go, let's say the player we know, Brett Emerton.
Yeah.
So Emo had an ACL injury, hated the gym, didn't want to do it, and would do it begrudgingly. Lammy, you know what he was like.
Yeah.
And I can remember Sam pulling me when he first came into the club, and he said, Emo, when's he back? I said, oh, he'll be back at 6 months. So when's he going to France? What's he need to go to France for? I send all my cruciates to France. I said, all right, you're the gaffer. I said, but I'd like to think that I've rehabbed 60, 70 cruciates. They've all come back at 6 to 9 months. Touch wood, none of them have I'd like to think we do an okay job. Right, okay then, Dav, if you can tell me he's back at... And Mo played at 5 months and 3 weeks.
I remember it.
And this is,
I remember it.
And this is where Sam's different to Suey. And after that game, Sam pulled me, fucking right, weren't you, Dava? You know, he'd remembered what I'd said. Whereas Graham wouldn't have said that. He'd have said nothing and just carried on playing it. So in that situation, I think it's that volume of work and how hard the lads work. Some of the lads who've come back with those types of injuries, the Reedies of the world, Abdul Fatu at Leicester, you know, he's done phenomenally. Look, he's playing nearly every game for Leicester now. And, you know, it's because he's worked so hard. And genetically, he's obviously got that body type where his strength gains are massive for the size of player he is. But those types of players have worked very, very hard to get to that point. And then you say to them, well, yeah, you had a cruciate done at the same time, but how often do you rehab? Well, probably once a week. Yeah, these lads are doing 6 days a week. You know, if they get a day off, and they're working, you know, till 5 o'clock. To change that tack as well slightly. And again, it's not just about the male players. Having worked in the women's game, you know, I found one of the differences working in the WSL is that the girls did not question what time they finished. If you said, look, we're going to be here till 5:30, yeah, fine, no problem. And they would get the same intensity at 5 o'clock as when they started at 9 o'clock. And I think that's one thing. I think the other thing is that recognizing when the workday starts. So, for example, we would have a situation, and again at Blackburn, you'll remember this, where we'd have an 8:15 swimming club, and at 8:16, the door was locked. And we had certain players, Miles Anderson, I can remember one who lived on Brockhall, were never on time. And they'd be banging on the door, I won't let them in, you're not coming in. You do it at 4 o'clock now. And I think they recognise that. Whether you'd be able to do that today, you'd probably get somebody complaining to somebody that it's not right. But if the players want to do it, they'll do it. And I think that's one of the hardest things is to recognise that players do work hard. And again, now you can go in, if they don't want to work hard, I don't know what you can do to change that if they're not going to do it. But I think that's where fans would be surprised at the intensity work.
Brilliant. Dava, thank you so much for all your insight. I haven't seen you for a long time, so it's been great to catch up.
It's nice to see
your face.
You know what I was going to mention, Warnie, and I need to mention it quickly. Do you remember when we did that swim in Tegernsee going over that lake?
Oh, my God, yeah, I do. Oh, wow, yeah. God, that was brutal, wasn't it?
And then the year we had Topper, when we had to do the pull-up to get out on the decking. Yeah. And Topper was miles behind me in the dock. And then he fell back in and he couldn't get up. I had to lift him out. Yeah.
Do you know,
you and me did it, didn't we, right across?
Yeah, we did. Yeah. I wasn't a bad swimmer. I was okay.
You were a decent swimmer, mate.
Yeah.
Best one we had, actually, of all the lads that took in there.
Oh, brilliant. Clip that one up. We'll put that on social media.
Yeah, definitely the best swimmer. Let me think who you're going against. Phil Batty, David Thompson, Topper, and I'm not sure if Darbs didn't do it one year.
Right.
There was somebody else. Yeah, you were the best out of them, Warnie.
I like that. Take that all day. Yeah. Brilliant.
No problem, mate.
Top man, Dava. Appreciate you coming on. Thanks for coming on.
No, mate. Thanks for having me.
Follow us on social media and YouTube at Strain on the Game. Subscribe, like, and follow.